Hey gang, welcome back to another video. Now if you've ever wondered how we made the fake bricks on our cemetery columns or on our above ground crypt, then you're going to want to stick around, because in this video I'm sharing all of my methods for making, painting, and installing realistic brick from foam. So let's get into it. One of the most important steps in creating realistic brick is starting with accurate dimensions. The standard American brick size is roughly 8 by 2.5 inches, and in many cases protrudes about 1/4 of an inch from the cement line. So with that in mind, I grab some 1-inch XPS insulation foam and a tape measure and can get to roughly marking out my brick shapes. Once I've got that squared away, I can get to cutting them down into their final shape with my hot wire tool. This can also be done with a sharp box cutter. Now, even though I marked out my cut lines in the foam, I still like to use the fence on my hot wire table to ensure consistent cuts. So I'll set its distance from the wire to the fence at 2.5 inches, and then I can start cutting my bricks. Once I have the width cuts done, I can split them along the vertical line, and then I'll adjust the fence to roughly half the thickness of the foam and get to splitting them in half. The reason I'm not making them equal thickness is because it will force the bricks to look more irregular once they're glued in place, which I feel helps to sell their authenticity. Now that I've got all of my foam bricks cut down to size, I can start to give them more character, and for that, I'll need my trusty rasp. Old bricks have much rounder and worn edges, so I'll use my rasp to soften the corners and add some wear to the edges, which will get me one step closer to my idealized brick. You'll notice in the pile of bricks that I also cut some of them in half. This will help to stagger and break up the brick pattern and helps to cut down on foam waste. And having looked at my fair share of old brick structures, I'll say that having an odd-shaped piece here and there definitely adds realism to the project. A quick bit of cleanup, and I can get to installation. Before I get to gluing the bricks down, I like to do a quick mock-up just to make sure I have all the pieces I'll need, and that I'm happy with the pattern they create. This step is particularly important if you're doing a pattern across multiple wall flats, since you'll want to accommodate for the wall seams without creating an obvious line. This scrap piece of plywood just happened to be the right width for these bricks, so the pattern works without any need for modification, and I can get to gluing the brick in position. And for that, I'll be using a bit of white Gorilla Glue and a spray bottle of water. The glue is activated by the water, so both surfaces will get a misting before I apply the glue to the back of the foam and press it into position. This version of Gorilla Glue is my go-to because it creates a strong bond between the foam and whatever substrate I'm gluing it to, plus it sets up faster than the standard version. There's a bunch of options for gluing foam, which I covered in another video, and I'll link to it in the video description if you want to check that out. Now that all the bricks are glued down and have been given time to set up, I can do a bit more aging to really make the foam look like old brick. and for that I'll need a bigger spray bottle of water and a propane torch. I'll start by spraying down the foam with water in an attempt to create lots of small to medium-sized water droplets. These droplets will protect the foam from being melted by the flame of the propane torch. Everywhere else will slightly melt when heated up. This is the same technique I use to add texture to my tombstones. However, on brick, I'm a bit more aggressive. The real key to this technique is to always keep the flame moving. You can always take a second pass to get the look just right, but staying in one place for too long will distort the brick shape, and nobody wants that when you're this far in on a project. Now, if you don't have a torch, don't worry. In a pinch, you could use a heat gun, although the foam reaction is much slower and it is a lot harder to control. For this technique, I'm holding the flame about 5 to 6 inches from the surface, and you can see that the areas where the droplets were are undisturbed, and everywhere else has slightly melted, giving these bricks a really pitted and aged texture. With the entire panel heat aged, I can go back with my rasp to soften up any of the hard edges that may still be on the panel. And when I've gotten it all taken care of, it's time for paint. To coat the bricks, I'll be using Drylock Original Masonry Sealer, since it already has a sandy, brick-like texture to it, but also because it will do a good job protecting the foam once it's dry. This will get applied liberally, making sure to get into all of the texture and recesses as well as the grout lines. And anywhere there are visible brush strokes will get addressed by pouncing with the paintbrush. When it looks like I've got complete coverage, I'll leave it for about 30 minutes to dry. Now that the base paint has had a chance to dry, I'm going to start adding some color, starting with a brick red, and we'll be applying it using a small foam roller. The paint application can be done by hand, but when you've got a large surface to paint, this really helps to make quick time of the work and helps to keep the paint application really random. After the brick red, I'll switch to some burnt umber, followed by burnt sienna, to further give a mottled undertone to the bricks. Bricks are a less consistent color than you'd think, so adding highlights and shadows help to give them more character, and it's the combined application of paints that really make them look right. With the undertones down, I'll bring in a brighter orange tone to really drive home that color. And once it's broadly applied, I'll go back with a brush, making sure to get into any of the recesses that I couldn't reach with the roller. It's worth noting that I'm not cleaning the roller between colors. Having a bit of the previous paint on the roller helps to blend all of the layers together in a more subtle way, and to ensure more gradual transitions between colors. Lastly, I'll add a highlight with a small amount of this creamy white color. I just want a few random bright areas, no solid coverage, to add more tonal variety to the panel. The last thing I'll do, since I have absolutely no interest in painting the edges of the bricks or the grout lines if I can avoid it, is to make a wash of burnt umber and black acrylic paint in water, and we'll spray down the entire panel. This will add an organic weathering layer to the brick, but will also minimize the fact that I didn't add anything in the grout lines or paint the sides of the bricks. Of course, you could add in spackle, tile mortar, monster mud, or even caulk to the grout lines, which would give the panel a more authentic and dimensional look, but for most cases, this approach will get the job done. Now, out of all the foam techniques I've shared, this is the one that fools people the most often. And while it may be more time-consuming than using brick paneling, I definitely think it's worth the extra effort. Well, that's going to do it for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. But most importantly, go make something.